McLennan Community College Online Professor Accountability, presented by Tyler Jackson, Alec Luckett, Andrew Marrero, Colby McAdams, and Emily Morrison. The current policies at MCC that were looked up in the Faculty and Adjunct Handbook, where faculty is instructed to express the importance of student evaluations at the end of each semester for each 11-week or 16-week course, and each instructor is subject to observation. Instructors who are tenured, tenure track, tenure eligible, and active adjunct faculty will meet with their supervisor annually. In this meeting, they look up things such as student advising, administrative duties, portfolios, and collegiality, and among other things as well. So it's clear that MCC does do something to express the importance of professor accountability, but maybe since students are still having trouble, that there is still an issue present. I was lucky enough to have an interview with Professor Wilson, Professor of Business Management. In this meeting, he taught me a lot about what his insight onto professor accountability, and kind of gave me a feel to it. The first question I asked him was, how do you feel professors and instructors are currently held accountable for classes? He explained that honestly there is limited accountability. There's not really any specific rules put in place for them as to providing feedback to emails or questions, or providing help when necessary. There's not really specificity as to what they need to do to help their students. It does depend on the professor's desire to improve and how they feel about constructive criticism given to them from their students from their course evaluations. The second question I asked him was, do you personally feel like more could be done to hold professors accountable to assist students? And he said, honestly, yes, but the issue is flexing academic freedom and accountability, and then that would probably present an issue in most cases. The third question I asked him was, do you personally feel like there's enough resources available to help online students? And he said that there was an adequate number of resources available, but the issue is students, regardless of the efforts made by MCC and professors to let them know, the students still somehow miss the resources and they still don't know that they're available. So the issue is advertising. And the fourth question I asked him was, do you find that online students need more or less assistance than those who take face-to-face courses? And he said there are exceptions, but in most cases, online students need less assistance than those who take face-to-face courses. The fifth and final question that I asked him was, as a professor and instructor, how do you feel about online courses versus face-to-face and your ability to teach them? He said only because his student life was strictly online, he is very clear in what needs to be done to help online students, and so he tries his absolute best, and so as a result he does prefer face-to-face courses because it's easier to build a relationship with students, but he does enjoy teaching online as well. The first two-year institution that I looked up to see how they address this issue of professor accountability was Nashville State Community College of Nashville, Tennessee. The enrollment here usually ranges from about 9 to 1050. Very mid-sized community college. In the job description of faculty item D of the faculty handbook, it says provide feedback to students within a reasonable amount of time. So it's clear that Nashville State Community College does expect their professors to respond to students and get back to them, especially when help is necessary. The minimum jobs standards section, item B, says evidence of dedication to academic practices, and the critical and skills expertise sections requires the faculty to have the ability to teach effectively. So very clearly this they want to have evidence that you like your job and that you want to help students whenever necessary and remain accountable, put in grades somewhat quickly, and do that. Of the two institutions that I looked up, this had the most evidence clear in the handbook of what they do to hold their professors accountable. The second institution that I looked up was Chinkita Community College of Salem, Oregon. The enrollment here of 2019 was 10,151, and in the years it just usually ranges around there, give or take a few. And in the handbook that we looked up once again, in the teaching expectations section, it says, monitor student progress in the class and give feedback throughout the term. Provide regular and timely feedback on assignments and exams for students to track their progress. Collect student feedback for course evaluations, both for adjunct and part-time faculty, and collect student feedback as applicable. So it's very clear that this issue is known among those who create the handbooks and upper college staff, but it obviously, since students are still talking about it and bringing it up, there is still an issue present. So it's awesome that something's being done, but there needs to be more done. Okay, and then the article that I looked up for seeing what this article's insight was into professor accountability was understanding the perceived quality of professors' teaching effectiveness in various disciplines, the moderating effects of teaching at top colleges. So this article, it specifically talked about Rate My Professor, and I thought this was awesome because you gain insight into the student's perspective of how effective or accountable a professor is. However, this article gave the almost the opposite perspective. So it discussed how even though a student might think that a professor is effective and accountable, there might be some other factors that are contributing to them thinking of that. For example, of course, students found easier classes, then they rated their professors better. They actually even found attractive professors to be considered better than those professors who are less attractive. And unfortunately, gender and race both also played a role in the perceived quality of each professor. For example, women were considered less effective than male professors, and then more minority professors were considered less effective and less accountable than white professors. And this has a specific steep when it comes to black male professors. They were rated significantly lower than those who are white. It is important for students to look at Rate My Professor and understand that quality is different from perceived quality. And so, obviously, it is not relevant whether your professor is a male or female. It's not relevant of what nationality your professor is from, and it's not relevant how easy your class is. What's relevant is how your professor teaches and how they respond to your questions and how quickly they put in grades and all of that. Alright, and then the next survey question that was asked in the survey was, my professors reply to my messages within 24 hours. The strongest, or the most answered option to this was disagree. So I think that says a lot that most students don't get a reply within 24 hours. That obviously in some cases, in a lot of cases, that is an issue. I found it interesting how the next most answered option was being neutral. And so personally, if I were to take this survey, I probably would have answered neutral, and I do that because some professors do answer within 24 hours and others it takes a week to get a response from them. So I think that this graph specifically says that most professors do a great job, but then others don't. The next survey question that was asked was, my professors assign coursework that reflects the core values of the curriculum. And this is awesome. The most answered option was agree, sitting at 45.3%. So I don't think it's often an issue that the coursework doesn't reflect the core values of the course that you are taking, and that is a good thing. The next most answered option was neutral, sitting at 30.2%. And then the next most answered option was disagree at 13.2%. So very clearly there are some students that have indeed run into an issue with coursework and how it reflects the values of the course, but probably doesn't happen that often, which is a good thing. Alright, and that's the presentation. Thank you for listening.